Okay, hi David, we are going live.
Okay.
You're live.
Bhavya, we are live. You can.
Right. A scientific mind not just thinks around the existing facts, but also imagines. It imagines the wildest possibilities and theories interesting enough to capture one's intellect. And sometimes, with dexterity and intense passion, the innovators even bring those fantasies alive, either in the form of technology or, well, in books and cinemas. So, to commemorate this scientific acumen, complemented by literary skills, I, Bhavya Malhotra, warmly welcome you all on this second exuberant day of Technex'22. Asia's oldest techno management fest, Technex is the annual flagship event organized by IIT BHU Varanasi that receives a footfall of over 20,000 students with budding and fruitful minds seeking to grasp new things from across 400 colleges in India every year. With the theme Simulating Reality, Technex is here to galvanize the enthusiast and broaden one's horizons. It's an honor for us to have the eminent presence of Mr. David Brin as our prominent guest for today's Think Talk. Mr. David Brin is an American scientist, author of several science fictions, and member of advisory board NASA. He's best known for shedding realistic and entertaining light on technology, culture, and the many challenges that our boisterous civilization faces. Having created riveting science fiction stories with his high concept storylines, sophisticated world building, and grasp on emotional nuance, Mr. Brin has won multiple awards for his hard science fiction works, including the Hugo, Locus, Campbell, and Nebula Awards. Among his best selling works are The Postman, Star Tide Rising, The Uplift Storm, Trilogy, Earth, Existence, and others. It's a delight for us to have such a distinguished guest at our Think Talk today. Sir, on behalf of Team Technex, I cordially welcome you aboard our virtually simulated planet brimming with ebullient residents. That is, at the gleaming stage of Technex'22. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Bhavya. And I'd like to also thank Aditra Kulkarni and the other members of the Technex team for inviting me. It is, of course, a different time zone here in California, but I want to extend my warm greetings to all of you in the, shall we say, the home of the zero, the home of actual mathematics that is taking us out to the stars, and the home of some of the greatest stars in the technology and visionary future. It's very exciting to see that science fiction is starting to take hold in the subcontinent, and we're all part of the same outward-looking civilization. You guys are bringing much needed additional color and vibrance to this exploration. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about human augmentation and artificial intelligence and compare them. So first I'm going to share my screen and hope that that works. And then I'm going to turn on my slideshow and hope that that works. And Bhavya, am I on? Is it working?
Your screen isn't visible yet.
Oh, I haven't pressed that yet.
Oh.
There.
Right, it's there.
Okay. So excuse me, I was born in the first half of the 20th century. So even though I helped to invent some of these things, I'm going to be a little bit clumsy with them. So the question I raised is, can we steer the wheel of destiny? Will human augmentation keep up with artificial intelligence? Now, of course, AI, artificial intelligence, is a major topic today. But of course, every time AI has appeared to be on the verge of coming true, something happened where we realized it was a little harder than we thought it was going to be. That could happen this time, but we'll cover that. So let me see if my, no, the space bar is not working. How shall I'm going to have to just, okay, so here are some of the titles of books that Bhavya has kindly mentioned. The Postman is my most famous book because it was turned into that movie with Kevin Costner. My most recent book is about science fiction in Hollywood, Vivid Tomorrows. But there are a lot of different explorations of potential futures. So we live in a world with many worries and problems. And so I'm sorry, there's some recordings on the background of some of these slides. I'll try to avoid those. We have problems of hunger, even though a smaller percentage of the world's children are hungry or missing school than at any point in the history of our species. A greater fraction of children have never starved and are going to school than ever before. It is still a huge number of problems that we still face and terrible injustices. And there is, of course, the problem of disease and other dangers and dangers of potential revolution. I'm sorry about the background. I thought I had cleaned all these away. And also there are problems of potentially how nature might strike us. So in any event, the biggest question is, can our civilization survive? Now, many past civilizations failed. And so one of the sets of ways in which we might have problems, and we're seeing this in the world today, is the ways in which civilizations failed in the past. And Arnold Toynbee studied these, Jared Diamond in his book Collapse. And so what we see is a list on the left of ways in which past civilizations failed. Some failed because of natural calamities, asteroidal impacts, solar EMP, the changes in the sun cycle. But some of them made these disasters happen by poor use of their natural environment. Irrigation, for example. Early farmers did not know that they were filling the fertile soil with salt until their civilization collapsed because they could no longer grow food. Another way that civilizations fell was enemies and war. As I am speaking right now, we are seeing this terrible, terrible curse visited yet again upon the world. Some societies melt down. Some have fallen into the trap of feudalism. In fact, most of them have at one point or another, because human males tend to like to establish themselves as paramount leaders and get all the privileges. And that plays a role in today's crisis. And some civilizations were outcompeted. I go into all of these in a different slideshow, but I thought I'd show you what we're up against, because now we have new calamities that we're thinking about. Information, AI, human augmentation. That one category is what we'll be talking about today. These are technologies that have almost infinite promise, but that also could go very badly. And one of the purposes of science fiction, especially hard science fiction that is scientifically based, is to explore possible ways in which things might go wrong or might go very well. The Anthropocene is a term for us doing ecological suicide on a massive scale. And to one extent or another, this is already happening, changing the planet in ways that will be visible in the rocks 1 million years from now. There are deadly innovations that you see in all the lurid sci-fi movies. And then there's a danger of renunciation, that our fellow citizens might decide that all of this is too scary and renounce forward progress. And of course, that would be a terrible mistake, because the past has very few useful lessons to us, except don't do feudalism and don't renounce. Do science, because then at least we have a chance. So there are two terms that you should look up on your own. One is the singularity, and the other is the Fermi paradox. And those are things that you can look up separately. Now, we are heading toward an era in which it's quite possible that we might solve our problems. We might become a species that takes on the galaxy. We might be the first to be able to do that. But in fact, when we get out there, there's the whole question of whether or not there will be other worlds for us. Now, one world that we might modify, and this is a portrayal of the planet Mars, if we were to somehow find a way to melt all the water there and turn it back into oceans. Well, that would be an amazing thing to do. But to bring us to today's topic, it's also possible that when we find worlds out there, we will modify ourselves to fit those worlds, to live on those worlds, instead of modifying the worlds to suit us. And here's a child who has been genetically engineered to be able to see much better in the dark. Well, this is kind of scary in some ways, but these are technologies that we are picking up in our hands right now, the powers of creation. So let's focus on the more immediate future. How will human enhancement start? This is a depiction of a scene from one of my novels called Existence. And you can see that most people on the street in this near future are wearing augmented reality glasses. When I wrote that novel, it was an unfamiliar concept to a lot of people. Now, we're all familiar with the notion that these technologies are on their way. And so we're enhancing ourselves the old-fashioned way. And this is a wider depiction of that scene with technologies of prosthetics, of vision, memory, and attention. And here you can see one of the characters in that book. And you can tell that her sunglasses have images being portrayed on the inner faces. She's living awash in data. But what are those antennas coming out of her hair? Well, they're very stylish, for one thing, but they can waft above the head and be cameras that look around. They could even float away like drones and find out what's going on somewhere else. So short people will never again suffer at a disadvantage. They'll be able to look over heads the way we crudely now do when we hold up these terrible slabs of glass that we think are the greatest modern things, these cell phones of ours. So what comes after these prosthetics? Is human augmentation possible for more intense ways? Well, I made a list here of possible near-term augmentations. And it turns out that the first augmentation, way to augment human beings, is the easiest and the hardest. And that is simply to provide nutrition and health and clean water and education for all. These are remedial interventions that have been proved to raise the average IQ points of the children who get these benefits by as many as 5 to 10 IQ points. So one way to make humanity smarter is simply to make humanity more just and honorable and compassionate, and to take care of everybody. And of course, that is something that we have been increasingly doing for the last century. We shouldn't lose our self-confidence because the job is not finished. It's not finished by a long way, but we need also to remember that things were much, much worse a century ago. Another way that human augmentation can happen is through stimulation. You stimulate natural human children with games that teach real mental skills. 25, 30 years ago, when my wife and I became parents, we thought these games would be showing up any day now to help us with our parenting. Well, they've been slow coming, but there are initial signs. I have contacts in the industry that they are finally figuring this out, how to give us good stimulating games that are fun, that kids want to play, and that teach them a lot of things. Category number 3 is pharmacology, chemicals. Some of you have seen the movie and the television show Limitless. This is all about what are called nootropics, and these would be pharmacological chemicals that you could take in a pill or in some other way that would expand our capabilities. Militaries all over the world have been looking into this for a century. During World War II, the Germans stoked all of their soldiers on speed, on meth. And of course, unfortunately, those soldiers wound up paying the price with insanity. But militaries are always looking for ways to enhance their soldiers. And there is now an industry of non-military people who are hoping to accomplish this as well. Another enhancement is prosthetics. We spoke of visual prosthetics from just augmented reality through these new kinds of Oculus glasses. But with exoskeletons, you'll be able to lift massive amounts. You'll be able to control drones or teleoperated machinery. You'll get feedback from these distant extensions. And it's been proved that you can wind up starting to feel as if the distant robot arm that you're controlling actually feels like it's part of you. And if somebody disconnects it, it feels like you've had something cut off of you. So we've seen this with apes already. Then there are cyber neuro links. Now this is getting further into science fiction, extending what we can see and know and perceive directly, not just through those glasses, augmented reality glasses. And Elon Musk's Neuralink company is trying to extend this, and we see it a lot in science fiction movies, and who knows where it would lead. Biological computing. Recent discoveries have indicated that the neurons in our brains are not just simple flip-flop switches like in a computer, like the transistors in a computer. It may very well be that these neurons contain hundreds of tiny computational elements inside each neuron. And some of them may be doing quantum effects. If that is the case, then biological computing has far more potential in certain ways than the machinery we're building with silicon. We're just now finding out about a lot of this. Okay, so the third to last category is familiar to us all, and that's artificial intelligence. I'll be talking a bit about that. It's a topic that everyone is talking about these days. And certainly it is one that in which there's a lot of fear and some degree of foolishness. People have a tendency to make assumptions about AI that don't make a lot of sense. If we make AIs that are smarter than us, then they should also realize that the nightmares of our science fiction movies may not be good things for them to do. Lifespan extension is another topic that involves human augmentation. We won't be talking about that today. And then there's genetically altering humanity. Because, I mean, if you're going to augment humanity, you could start in utero, you could start with the beings that we start up, that we make. And these are all, each of these is worth several hours, but we don't have time to do anything but scratch the surface. Now, augmentations are underway. Neuralink, I mentioned, Elon Musk's company, is looking for cyber implants that might help people to enhance their ability to focus or anticipate. And at the bottom, I mention two great science fiction novels that discuss this possibility. One of them is Rainbow's End by Vernor Vinge. I highly recommend it. So, shall we meddle with the recipe of life? Well, you can see the genetic code behind this fetus. So shall we make smarter humans? You might make it illegal, but could any law actually prevent it from happening? This is the problem with laws against technology. They tend to make the technologies go secret. And as a result, the rich and the powerful have access to things that we don't have. Better than making things illegal is to make them transparent so that we can all see what's happening and notice and criticize mistakes in public. Now, of course, artificial intelligence is getting most of the attention, and we all see all sorts of stories in both fiction and nonfiction about AIs or robots that are deadly, that are sexy, that are weird or lovable, that are depressing, that are scary and mysterious. But the question is whether or not AI might happen by surprise, not out of physical robots, but manifesting out of the algorithms on the internet. There are already free-floating algorithms that are like small microscopic life forms, like bacteria or viruses. We know about computer viruses, but computer bacteria are free-floating algorithms that move around from memory space to memory space on the internet. Some of them even offering services or contracts and existing outside of any ownership or any actual institution. So we're already entering this era. Okay, so let's talk about the general approaches to artificial intelligence. Well, we thought that we could design artificial intelligence by using logic, algorithms that are designed to manipulate knowledge. Until very recently, it was assumed that this would be how we would do it. And IBM is still very much involved in this field with their Watson And it's called GOFAI, good old-fashioned AI, or universal AI. And some would argue that algorithmic quantum computers would be like this. Cognitive evolutionary or neural nets are competitive, internally competitive with many sub-selves, and they are recursive and self-improving. And this has been getting all the news lately. These are the neural nets like GPT-3 that have broken all the records, that are now powering online humanoid figures that speak in human tones and can hold believable conversations and are writing books. They still don't pass a Turing test. If you are very careful, experts can still trap them. But this version of AI swept ahead just in the last 5 years. And they can steal from each other. And the, of course, unnerving thing about these systems is that we know almost nothing about what happens inside them. We give them starting conditions and we give them reward ending conditions. And the ones that can connect the two are the ones that win. And we know very little about what went on inside these things. Now, emergent AI is what you see in a lot of sci-fi films. And this is where you have something that's partly smart. It's doing its work as a financial stock program. And it borrows skills. It's programmed to borrow skills across the internet. Or maybe it's a self-driving car. And one day, suddenly something happens where it borrows different parts from different places, pieces them together, and something non-linear happens. The partly smart AI takes off in an explosion of capability that is vastly more than the sum of the parts that it had been putting together. And this is, of course, what happens in the Terminator movies with Skynet. But I am much more worried about Wall Street and the financial HFT programs. That's high frequency trading. The top 10 banks on Wall Street and also in many other stock exchanges around the world. These top Wall Street banks and financial trading houses are spending more on artificial intelligence than all of the universities on the planet. And the AIs that they are building are predatory, parasitical, amoral. They are designed to be parasites. It's their whole purpose of existence. And they are being designed in secret. This is where we would get Skynet. I don't think Skynet would come from the military. I think it would come from these banks. Now, another area is to reverse engineer the human brain. I mentioned that the human brain can do so many things, and we're finding out more and more and more of them. And it may very well be that the only type of intelligence that we can make is the type we already know, and that's us. And so in order to make new artificial intelligence, we will have to copy what works, us. So that's a fourth way to get artificial intelligence. The fifth is a little unusual. It's a little strange. It was depicted in Steven Spielberg's movie AI. And that is to understand the only intelligence that we know of in the universe, and that's ourselves. Well, how did we get it? That's an interesting question. We didn't get it through logic algorithms. We didn't get it through cognitive evolutionary neural nets. We didn't get it by reverse engineering the human brain because we made the human brain. We got it through evolution. And 200,000 years ago, we had to get smart or we would all die. How did we do it? Well, it turns out that we did it by extending human childhood. Humans have absurdly long childhoods, proportionately vastly longer than anything else on the planet. As a matter of fact, the babies we give birth to and we love are virtually fetuses. They're absolutely useless at taking care of themselves, unlike any other infants in nature. Eventually, they become able to walk and do, they bat against, they make terrible mistakes, they fall, they skin their knees, they cry. It may be that this is what is needed in order to create real intelligence. Now, if that were true, then in order to create robotic AI, we would make the smartest thing we could in a box about the size of a human skull, put it on a robot, and foster that little robot into human families to be raised. Because that's how we do it. We know how to do it. We know how to love an adopted child. We know how to discipline an adopted child. And it may very well be that this is the only way to get real intelligence. If that's the case, then we can raise our children to love us back. And then we won't worry too much about Skynet, because 99% of human children grow up and they decide not to destroy all humans. So, all right, we're seeing some in the news this week whom perhaps weren't well raised. And then the last one, it would be the amplification. Oh, I have another of those little audio things. Would be the amplification of intelligence in our fellow creatures on this planet. Now, some of my science fiction novels are about this. What if we were to meddle with the intelligence or sapience of great apes or dolphins, or perhaps the smartest of them all, crows and ravens? They're scary. And also parrots are very smart. This is something that I depict in a number of my novels. And of course, we all know Planet of the Apes. Those earlier versions warned against us doing it, but we're going to do it anyway. So in my novels, I explore what mistakes we might make and how we might do it right. And there's your parrot. And sea lions. They're all over the place. Elephants. Prairie dogs. There's the elephant. See the elephant painting a picture? This may be our job. This may be why we're here, to help others cross a very difficult gap. And it's called uplift. And maybe it's the right thing to do, but maybe not. I don't know. That guy's got a skeptical look on his face. But in any event, this is one of my fans drew this illustration of a human, a chimp, a squid, and a dolphin playing poker. Well, wouldn't it be a more interesting civilization? And there are people who are looking into how to get diversity by this means. And this is a scene, another scene from my novel Existence. Okay, so we're exploring the territory ahead. I mentioned the movie Limitless, another one that is about human augmentation through pharmacology, is an excellent film by Luc Besson called Lucy. And then there are some less good movies. And I gave an example there on the left about human enhancement. There are nonfiction books that are very, very good about this. The best one is the one on the left, Abundance by Peter Diamandis, about how we have many problems in the world, but there are many good things happening. And we will better be able to solve the problems if we admit those good things are happening, because then we'll understand what tools we have and we'll have the confidence to use them. And of course, then there's written science fiction. Charles Strauss's Accelerando, Robert Heinlein talked about genetic engineering, and there's an earlier novel of mine about ecology in the future called Earth. So what do we have here? Yes, well, we're in the process of making our own diversity is what I'm talking about. I spoke today about artificial intelligence. Again, that's a topic that I give talks on. In fact, I give courses that take 5 hours about artificial intelligence and all the things we're missing, because a lot of these conferences about artificial intelligence, they miss the essential things we're going to encounter. But also I spoke about human augmentation, how we might alter ourselves. Perhaps we might keep up with our silicon children. Perhaps we will absorb them and become cyborgs in the bad way, as in Star Trek and the Borg, or cyborgs in the good way, in which we basically do what we have done with the human brain for the last million years, and that's simply add new layers. And I spoke about our relationship to the natural world and to animals. So the question is, will this prospect please everyone? There is guaranteed to be a great many millions of people on this world who would absolutely hate any of these things, because there are other older ways of appealing to the other and appealing to the future. And these other ways are more emotionally satisfying than science, unless you actually try to see that science is the thing that has delivered for us. There are people who yearn for contact with aliens because they think that that's how we might get a helping hand. And this is a scene from the video trailer to my novel Existence. You should look it up. It's a really fun 3-minute video trailer. The novel is called Existence. But while we're waiting, our own diversity is going to augment. And those of you who are familiar with the Bible story in the Judeo-Christian Bible, it's also in the Quran, of the Tower of Babel. You know that the lesson of this story has been that humans should not arrogate to try to reach heaven physically or to take on God's powers. But if you actually read the story, and it's just 1 page in the Bible, that's not what it means at all. It means that we weren't ready to try that. But God had been extremely angry at 1 page before, and he drowned the world. A page later, he was extremely angry and he hurled fire from the sky. He doesn't hurt anybody in the Tower of Babel. He doesn't punish anybody. He scatters us to the far corners of the world to learn how to be different, to learn diversity. So this is an allegory for ourselves right now, because we are building that tower again. We're building it right now as we speak. And I guess we're going to find out if that's permitted, because we're heading up into the stars and language is no longer a problem. So I guess we'll find out. In any event, here are about 1,000 out of a trillion galaxies in our universe, and we're combing the sky looking for signals, and we haven't found a trace yet. There's the Drake equation by my friend Frank Drake that we use to try to calculate the likelihood. And you can look it up. There are all sorts of videos about the Drake equation. Try to calculate the likelihood that we might find aliens out there. And so far, it's been nothing. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. Meanwhile, we ask, where is everyone? Well, all right. So what's the result of all this talk? Well, what we have is a world that's in our hands. We can destroy it and incur the wrath of creation. We can create the Anthropocene era, and the few descendants we have will look back at us as having been the cursed generation that blew it. And you can see that depicted in the lower right in a scene from the classic science fiction movie Soylent Green. Or perhaps we might steer the wheel of destiny towards something better and make great wheels of prosperity in space and on the earth. These are both visions that are within our reach. We could have one or the other, and it's going to be up to us. And it's going to be up to something called civilization. So again, another scene from the cool 3-minute video trailer from my novel Existence. It'll be 3 minutes of fun, I promise. But meanwhile, we're left with the question, what if we're the ones who are fated to go out there and help everyone else? Maybe we're the ones who will light up the galaxy. Okay, so there's my website. Many of the images came from the brilliant artist Patrick Farley, whose websites are well worth visiting for his online comics, and also some images from motion pictures. I will now open things up for questions and stop screen sharing. How do I do that? Go to Zoom. Go to Zoom. Zoom. There it is. View. Stop share. There we go. Now you guys can stop spying on me. All right. So.
Yes, sir.
And I hope that was at least slightly interesting.
Yes, sir, definitely. Thank you for, plausibly and entertainingly sharing your insights on artificial intelligence, innovation, society, and countless other challenges confronting our rollicking civilization via this enchanting and hooking presentation, I'd say. It was indeed a pleasure to witness your Think Talk. And our audience here is quite excited and have shared with us some questions for you. So shall we move towards them?
Yes, please. But may I also comment that it is very obvious that we will all be seeing more of Bhavya over the course of the next decades on various media. That is a foregone conclusion. Okay, first question.
Yes, sir. So according to you, what role does science fiction play in attracting the youth towards fundamental research? particularly in areas like astronomy, which are the frequent and most celebrated genres in sci-fi literature?
Well, over the last 20 years, there's been a shift to a lot more science fiction that's about biology. But yes, the skies beckon. A few years ago, a fellow by the name of Liu Cixin, who was in this room, I'm proud to say, visiting me maybe 3 years ago, he became the great epic heroic science fiction novelist of China. And he is profoundly influential in China today, and they are having a huge burst of science fiction there, with some basic differences in how they write, how they tell stories, and difference is great. Science fiction certainly starts out being discussed as a literature that inspires the youth. But its principle, I mean, I'm creating several series of novels that are for teenagers. One of them is the Out of Time series, in which teens from across time and different cultures jump into the future to help save future human civilization. It's called the Out of Time series, and you can find it on my website. So yes, serving as inspiration to the young, and especially to believe that you can solve problems. But you can see that an awful lot of the science fiction movies that are consumed by young people, like the Hunger Games, don't inspire anything except depression. I mean, they're adventurous. I mean, the heroine has a great old time shooting arrows into villains, but they don't discuss any issues. And when you get right down to it, that's what science fiction is for, and especially the science fiction for adults. I mean, it is arguable that the science fiction novels Brave New World in 1984 helped to prevent the dark futures that they portrayed, because millions of people read them and decided, I'm going to fight against this ever happening. Certainly, millions and millions of environmentalists today who are at the forefront, like Greta Thunberg, who are at the forefront of the fight to save our planet, almost all of them will tell you that they were first inspired to enter this fight by science fiction. Some of them credit my novel Earth. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes, sir, it does. So as we mentioned about youngsters, so we know that our childhood shapes us in ways unknown. So is there a sci-fi that you read as a youngster which till date has a huge impact on you and might be instrumental in making you who you are today?
Well, there were science fiction giants. I was privileged to know Arthur C. Clarke, and his science fiction was about our ability to make things happen technologically. I knew Ray Bradbury. We went to the same high school 20 years apart. And he taught me that this is a genre of literature that can be as beautiful, as well written, as inspiring, and as much about humanity and spirituality as any of the other genres of literature, because he was a great poet. My father was a poet of some note. I knew Isaac Asimov, not very well, but I knew him. And of course, his notion that we can inspect a problem, turn it around, look at it from many angles. And this is the spirit that Liu Cixin carried forward in his epic trilogy, the three-body problem that I mentioned earlier. So there were giants. Probably the best storytellers were Robert Heinlein, Poul Anderson, and the great explorer of culture, Ursula Le Guin. But I will provide any of these names in an email so that your folks at Technex can look things up. But there's probably no better place to start than here.
Sure, sir. Right. So moving on to the next question. One of the hot topics in science society today is the revived space race, not just amongst the nations, but amongst the multinational corporations like SpaceX, Blue Origin, etc. So how do you perceive the space race shaping up in the future and all the consequences that it might carry with itself?
Well, we have to hope that in today's crises, nobody takes it into their head to blow something up in low Earth orbit that would then make it very hard for us to use space, because it's been very useful to us. The weather satellites have saved millions of lives and helped to save crops. The ecological satellites have helped us to understand climate change. Telecommunication satellites are what we're relying upon at this very moment. And of course, the great peace. Now, you may argue that the last 80 years have not been entirely peaceful, but per human being, per capita, divided out among 8 billion human beings, the last 80 years have been by far the most peaceful in the history of our species. And one of the big reasons was because rival powers could see what each other were doing. If that goes away, it could be a very, very big blow to humanity. But we'll overcome it. Now, the new companies that are pushing ahead with new kinds of rockets. I know these guys. They are an important part of solving the problems because they are turning the lift part of space into a profitable and efficient enterprise. But there's so much more to space than just lifting off the Earth. I am a consultant with NASA's Innovative and Advanced Concepts program. And there are so many things that nations and people can still do. Universities and high schools are creating what are called CubeSats. And I know of at least 5, but I'm pretty sure there have been at least 30 that were from India. Small CubeSats that are integrated by the University of California and launched as secondary payloads into orbit. And so private universities, even high schools, are getting involved in space research. Of course, there's the marvel that India is sending by far the most efficient, economically efficient space probes to the moon and Mars. I hope this means the same thing in India that it does here.
Yes,
Does
sir,
it?
definitely.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, good, because I don't want to make a terrible mistake. So, terrific. And space is terribly important. Just remember, it's going to take a long time. Unless there's some weird breakthrough, we're going to have to be the shoulders that our children stand on. And we're going to have to prepare them to gird their shoulders so their children can stand on them. The best we can do today is save the world and make the makers of the makers of the makers of the real humanity. If we do those two things, people will look back at us and they will say, those ape men did that? They did that? That's amazing. They didn't augment, they had no augmented brains. They had none of the stuff that Brin talked about on that evening. And they still saved the world and made the makers of the makers of the makers who will finally make real humans.
That was very heartwarming, sir, the way you presented it. So yes, and the next questions, it's related to Technex. So being a sci-fi author and scientist, how do you feel about the theme of Technex, that is simulating reality?
Well, I mean, we are in an era in which simulated reality has gone beyond what I do. I create chains of little black squiggles called letters that weave back and forth across pulped wood pulp pressed into sheets. In other words, black letters that make sentences across a paper page. For a great many generations, that was the miracle that allowed one person's imagination to create simulated realities in a reader. And it's still by far the best. But we wound up getting cinema and radio. And now, as I portrayed in some of my slides, reality is going to enter the inside of our glasses, maybe our contact lenses, maybe direct. So it's an amazing era. Certainly Technex and its explorations of concepts for simulation and augmentation of reality has a major role to play in all of this, and I congratulate you. I wish you good luck, but also wisdom.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your best wishes, as well as for resonating with our theme. So the next question, it's about your own quote only. When it comes to privacy and accountability, people always demand the former for themselves and latter for everyone else. So when I read this quote of yours, it almost blew my mind as the realization hit. So how do you think this attitude of people can be directed in the right direction?
Well, this is a quotation from one of my nonfiction books, not a novel, called The Transparent Society. And what I try to point out is that all human beings are delusional. We see a subjective world that's only a simulation of objective reality. I mean, this is right there in the Bhagavad Gita. It's in the sutras. It's in Jesus said it, Socrates said it, Plato said it. But what we found out was there are ways of piercing these delusions. Human history is filled with tragedy because societies were shaped like pyramids, ruled by egotistical bands of males who took away everyone else's women and wheat because they could, because they had swords. And the worst part of it is that they ruled their nations very badly because no one could say, you're delusional. You are inflicting a fantasy upon all of us. And I'm afraid there is a powerful world leader who is doing that right now. And nobody in his nation dares to tell him, you've gone insane. But in a democracy, that's the great discovery of Pericles. in the Athenian democracy and it was crushed, but gradually we've rediscovered it. No one should escape criticism, even when they're right. So there are two solutions to human delusion. One is the sacred catechism and mantra of science. Scientists are taught to repeat this sacred vow. I might be wrong. And that is responsible for a huge part of our scientific discoveries. It is the essence of maturity to be able to say, I think I'm right, but I might be wrong. But that maturity is not enough. The other thing that helps us penetrate delusion is criticism. Because your delusions, Bhavya, are not the same as my delusions. So you can see my delusions. You can't see your own. I can see nothing wrong with you. But this is a good reason to get married because you get a built-in critic. So I hope that that makes it clear that the reason why I support transparency and open societies is first because all of the ones that crushed criticism and openness failed, and ours has not yet. Ours has created more science and more fun and more justice because we're open and we criticize each other, and no king can kill you for saying you're wrong. Well, there are kings in this world.
Right. That was a really powerful and strong answer, I'd say, and cheerful as well. So next question is, which work of yours is your personal favorite, like that you admire the most, your magnum opus, if you call it?
Well, I would have to ask that person if they have children, which is your favorite child? It's not
Yeah.
fair. Now, The Postman is the one that moved the most hearts in the world, partly because of the movie and partly because it is my love song to civilization, how much we would miss civilization if it were gone. Earth is my daughter who brings passion and intellect to trying to save the world. I have a novel called Glory Season that is all about feminism in the far future. I like it. My wife liked it. It didn't sell that well. Existence is the one that I mentioned with the video trailer, and I am going to put that video trailer in the chat right now. Oh yes, it's over here. So it's in the chat and people can enjoy that. And that's my most recent big novel. But I have to say that a favorite for people, a lot of people, is called Kiln People, K-I-L-N People,
Yes.
made of clay, where you can make copies of yourself. And that's what I need. Okay?
Sure, sir. We'll share the links with the students in our college and all the participants who are here with us in Technex'. So,
Well, I have put in my website, and I am going to give a link to those who would like to write science fiction
sure, sir.
for advice. Okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. We'll share it with all the concerned people.
All right.
And moving towards the end, would you like to give some piece of advice to the young, raw-minded generation who have access to the latest technology, yet want to seek and explore more and more?
Well, try to survive, if you want to be good at something, the best thing you can do is the hardest thing you can do. And that is teach yourself to seek and even a little bit enjoy criticism. Human beings hate it. And as I said earlier, it's the one thing that is the antidote to error, to making mistakes. If you seek gladly criticism, even from your enemies will be glad to criticize you. They will give you criticism for free. You won't even have to pay for it. Your enemies will criticize you for free. And here's the interesting thing. It's a barter economy. You'll be happy to criticize them. The difference between you and your enemies will be that your enemy will get angry when you criticize them. Good. You won't get angry. You'll take notes. You'll say, that's very interesting. Thank you. Tell me more. And nothing you can say will anger your enemy more than saying, oh, that's very interesting. This is ridiculous. This point you made is wrong, but these 2 points, they're going to make me even better. Thank you. Imagine your enemy hearing you say that. In other words, this is a win, win, win. And the most important concept that you can possibly have other than criticism is, I'm typing this in, the positive sum game. So those are 2 concepts. They're related to each other. Teach yourself to be able to endure criticism and even to seek it out, and look for positive sum games. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for gracing the stage of Technex'22 and making it all the more illustrious and memorable for us. We will surely be checking out the trailer of Existence and keep in mind the significance of criticism, as you said. Your lively aura magnetized us towards the talk and compelled us to revolutionize the way we think, act, and respond. So now, on behalf of Team Technex, I would like to thank each one of you for being here today and dipping yourself in the blissful second day of 83rd edition of Technex. We really hope you are having an enthralling experience with us in Asia's oldest technological extravaganza. So stay Technex, keep criticizing and appreciating the criticism, and see you again. So I would like to request you to stay for a while since we have some members from the Outreach Club FMC IIT BHU.